see the world through other people's eyes. Now, empathy is a quality of character that can change the world.
Unites people, armies, gold, flags, stories. There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story. Nothing can stop it.
If you want to stand out from everybody else, you need to get into storytelling.
Draw a different frame around the same set of circumstances and new pathways come into view.
Welcome to ARTEFACTLive with me, Scott MacArthur, where we look at the art and science of story. We don't care who you are, whether you're a bricklayer, a professor or a speaker, all we care about is you being a good storyteller.
Thank God the drummers arrived.
It's time to realise that facts tell, but it's stories that sell.
Get me some nasty and get it now or someone's getting shot.
And that's a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche. 1,000 comments.
Selling a hemorrhoid cream to someone who's got hemorrhoids.
Got a whip.
I was born into a deep contradiction.
This stuff's magic.
Oh, that's so clever.
Good morning, everyone. For the last time on ARTEFACTLive, but only in the morning. I'm moving the show till 12:30 next week. I've had a few people ask me to think about moving it because more and more people are back in the office. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to move it. So it's been a tough week for me here. We've all had COVID, and you might hear a slight catch on my throat, unfortunately. So I'm okay. It's just I've been in my bed for 4 days, and this is the first time I've got out of my bed to do anything. So it's quite nice, but I'm looking forward to it. And I didn't want to move this because I feel that this is a really fascinating topic that I wanted to talk to you about and to share some experiences and get my guest on today to talk about it with you. But it's going to be one of those shows where I might do that quite a lot. I've got a bottle of water here, so hopefully I can sound at least partially coherent as we go through the session. In the last couple of shows, we've gone down a route that I never expected us to take, and that was a route of where we looked at the sort of human traumas and human struggles related to storytelling. And we heard from experts that talked about how maybe stories are only part of the answer and there's a lot more to it. We heard from another person who had, it was an amazing last week. I don't know if you remember, I'll put his picture back up again. Last week we had Chris on, and Chris Freer had an incredible story about, it was everything from bravery to passion, to pain, to nutrition, to recovery, transformation. It was covering everything. But at the heart of all that, it was lovely to hear Chris in his very down-to-earth way tell a story of how he came through that and is flourishing as a consequence. So it was a real pleasure to have Chris on. So this week, and this just happened naturally. I was looking for guests for the show, as I always am, and I came across someone who I thought, oh my goodness, look at this, and it was like it couldn't have set it up better, to be honest. It's just like, oh, this is perfect, because what my guest this week does is she takes literature and she takes stories and uses it for all sorts of different purposes, and one of them is for therapy. She uses books for therapy, so I think it's terrific. So I'm going to introduce my guest now, so I'll just get you on now. Bijal, here we go. Welcome to the show. How are you? Oh, there we go. We're having a little bit of problem with you. Yeah. You seem to be coming on and off the stream, so we might have a little problem here. We might have to reboot and restart, Bijal. But how are you? Nice to see you. Thanks for joining me.
It's so lovely to see you, and I'm so delighted to be here on this show. I think there's such a overlap between what you do and what I do, and I cannot wait to learn more.
It's cut out again. I hope if this continues, Bijal, we may have to get you to try on your phone, because it is literally going every 10. It's such a shame, because it looks great. It really does. It's such a shame. So could I ask you to give the viewers some background about what it is you do and how you got there? Because it's a really good story in itself, to be honest. I really like it.
Absolutely. So therapy. I ended up having to obviously do a lot of therapy myself. That's like a key part of your training. And I sort of realized that I was referring to books a lot, to like the Greek myths. I mean, a lot of Freudian psychology is based in Greek. History of bibliotherapy, which is based on...
No, but sorry, we're really having problems connecting here today. I wondered, Bijal, if you could try the link that I gave you on your phone, and let's see if it works a little bit better there. And I'll just talk to people while you're doing that. Someone on LinkedIn has just said that they much prefer my studio background. Have no fear, it's still there. I'm looking at what I'm going to do over the next little while, and I've been not redesigning it. It's the same. It's still there. It's all, well, I can prove it to you. Still there. But I've been doing some recording for a client, and they needed me to have a nice simple background, which is why I've got the nice simple background. So hopefully it'll make a comeback. Now the interesting thing is that in the next the next session, if you like, I've got some ideas, so I'm looking forward to changing things. But don't worry, it's coming back. I'm not getting rid of the artifact. Well, we're back now.
Hi, Scott. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Now. Let's start again.
And fingers crossed.
Yeah, it looks stable. So fingers. I think there's maybe a little loose wire somewhere in your camera on your laptop.
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. Can you hear me now? I'm just gonna.
There's a little bit of echo, but I'll shush, and I'll ask you to, let's start again with welcome to the show. And could you let people know how you got into this incredibly interesting idea? It's not something I'd ever heard of before, bibliotherapy. How did you get into that? How did that come about?
Sure, yeah. So when I was doing my training as a counselor and psychotherapist, we had to do a lot of training ourselves. So part of the training is being in therapy. And during those therapy sessions, I'd find myself leveraging literature a lot. So, referring a lot to the Greek myths and Greek tragedies, and like even some of George Eliot's work, and just, I'd just be reaching out to books a lot. And I felt that there was something really powerful here in terms of, being able to explore your own feelings from a safe space. Which was through the character in the book, or through the protagonist, or through the story. And it's not a new thing, because a lot of art therapy does the same. We kind of draw things and then we talk about the picture rather than talking about ourselves. So that's sort of how I came across it, and I sort of began like a whole sort of series of research into the topic and into bibliotherapy. And there's a whole host of literature and research done around the subject. There's an excellent book by Dr. Kelda Green that only just came out last year, called Rethinking Therapeutic Reading, and she really sets out like the history of how therapeutic reading has come about, and the sort of four main, I guess, founders, or not founders, but key influences in this space, starting from sort of, I guess, all the way back from Stoics and Seneca to Montaigne to George Eliot, and also Wordsworth, and the use of different literary, I guess, inventions, if you want to call them that, but really, the Greek tragedy, the essay, which Montaigne wrote a lot. He examined a lot of his ideas through personal essay, the novel, which was very much Eliot's, and George Eliot was obviously a great novelist, and then Wordsworth poetry. So those are sort of the four sort of literary inventions that I would call, as I call them, that are just really profound in achieving some sort of personal healing, and they facilitate therapy and healing. Anyway, so that was my story, and I eventually sort of ended up launching a bibliotherapy practice, providing sessions, but also kind of curating reading lists for both personal interest and therapy. I had a lot of people who were just curious and wanted specific literature about specific things that they were going through.
Yeah. So let me. I mean, I guess I had an inkling that such a thing existed, because I mean, I've been reading the Stoics every day for 30 years. I've been reading Tolstoy every day for the last 10 years. It's part of my daily practice.
Yeah.
It's not something I ever saw as a therapeutic practice. It was more an intellectual practice for me. I never saw it as any therapeutic practice. But where did the idea come? Honestly, I'd never heard of it. Where did this first? How can a book act as a therapeutic tool?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been doing this for years. Our relationship with books has been around for 2-3 millennia, ever since the book was really invented. Yeah. But I guess in terms of formalizing it or giving it a label, I think what happened was, especially during the World Wars, there were literally libraries attached to hospitals, because there was so much trauma in the World Wars, and soldiers needed beyond just the medicinal treatment. They did need a lot of sort of, I guess, mental health kind of mental health treatment, but not quite therapy. And obviously we hadn't really got to the Freudian stages, or there wasn't really therapy as we know it now. And so they would just be reading poems. Doctors would be writing poems, to their patients. Like John Keats was a classic example. He was a doctor, but also a great poet. And a lot of amazing poetry got written during that World War era, and people would just be soldiers would really be using this. And so there was a lot of literature that was curated at the time to offer it to these soldiers, and etc. But then off the back of that, there was a lot of research that was done, and I think it was in 1950 or 1949, Caroline Schroeder, who actually, as part of her dissertation and her PhD, she kind of pulled together a real framework for bibliotherapy, which is not so different to other conventional forms of therapy, but kind of using things like identification with the character, and then being able to connect with the text and explore our feelings and thoughts, and hopefully using that to get to a state of catharsis, as you would in any therapy, and then also reaching some sort of resolution at the end, or just being able to sit with our feelings and in a safe space. And I guess literature kind of creates a safe space when we are reading, because we kind of feel safe, we connect, and we also feel safe to explore the feelings in the book, which might be triggers for us, but also feel safe to explore them from a distance. So, and I think a lot of bibliotherapy has been built off the back of her work, but then also it's, like I said, it's kind of pretty similar to many other forms of art therapy out there.
Right. So there was one. I mean, your website's extraordinary. The the number of books that you've got on there is amazing. If I come along and if people haven't seen your website, it's well worth a look actually. But if I come along and you offer to write a prescription for me, I love that you say on the website. You'll do a prescription for someone who needs some help. What would you do? How would you go about coming up with the right prescription for somebody who'd come to see you? What's that process like?
Sure. So I get you to fill out a questionnaire. Like normally it's on the website, but it can also be, offline. And I would want to make sure it's really, really tailored to what you're interested in, because you have to be invested in the reading. And if it's not something that would strike a chord with you, there's no point in prescribing it or suggesting it. And so I would sort of ask you, do you prefer fiction, non-fiction? What kind of genres do you like? What authors do you like? What kind of books do you like? Mm-hmm. Just to get a sense of your, what you actually like to read. And then, of course, like what issues are you looking to explore? Is there something specific? Because obviously, like that's the whole purpose of the list. And then, of course, understanding your reading habits, like actually how much time do you have to read? Because some people will have lots of time, those who are retired, and then those who, are struggling on a day-to-day basis might only have, maybe even 15 minutes a day, like before bed or something. So, I'd be very sort of mindful of that, like what's going to be an efficient form of reading for them. Is it like a short story collection? Is it like a poetry collection, or a short novella? And of course, or like a short nonfiction book if that's their preference. So like that's really important, that reading time plus reading habits. Are you a paperback reader? Are you audio? Are you Kindle? Because different books are available in different formats. So I guess I would like create a picture of like your reading profile, and then also what are the issues that you are seeking to explore through therapeutic reading. And like I said, I also do it for sort of, doesn't have to be therapeutic, but like personal development, like if it's a career change that you're going through, or if it's something you're keen to learn more about, like art and culture, or writing, improve your writing skills. It's just, it can be really tailored. I've also had lots of people ask me about travel. That's interesting for them.
And is this the sort of the, thank you for that. We're getting a little bit of echo as well at the moment. I don't know if you can hear it at your end, particularly when I speak. No. Is that what you would call being? Is that the curation part of the role that you do? Is that what you would call that? Is that book curation?
Yeah. Right. I would call that book curation, definitely. Right. Yeah.
Right.
Versus therapy, which is the actual therapeutic process of healing.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's quite interesting this, because the way I read, I read 3 books a week usually.
That's fantastic.
And I have done that forever. I've done that all my, probably all my adult life.
That's why you're such a great storyteller.
Oh, thank you. I don't feel like it today, I have to say, thanks to COVID. I need to start telling stories about COVID. But I would be terrified for someone trying to curate a book list for me. Now, that's not arrogant. It's just, the way I learn is organic. So I'll take a stream of books around. What have I got here? I'm just grabbing one. Right, this is here. Right, that's the one next to me. The deeper. This is about the Human Genome Project. Right.
Oh yes, yeah.
And I will spend this guy. I actually met this guy, and he gave me this. But I'll read that book, and then I'll say, okay, John Parrington says this, but he recommends I read this, and I'll spend the next 6 months probably following that book, if you like. It's the tendrils of that book into literature. Some of it will be good, some of it will be rubbish. It's just the way I do it. So how would you interrupt me if I came to you and I said I need some help with concentration, and I read lots, what would what would your how would you cope with an annoying person like me? But I don't mean it in that way. I mean, what would you then say to me? Okay, this is your habits, and I read all the time, so that's reasonably easy. But how would you tease out of me, or from your experience and your? I mean, it's fascinating. This I love it. How would you tease out from the literature? Because there's so much literature. You know, what would be helpful?
Yeah, so I would, if you're telling me you've got issues with concentration, I would, it's quite easy to jump to sort of a psychiatric diagnosis as well. Like, what is it? Is it why are you so distracted? What are the reasons behind that? So I'd sort of look into that, and that could be a variety of things, right? Like from ADHD or autism, but it could be that you don't really have that, and it's just like some traits that you're experiencing. And then I would sort of prescribe some books that might be good for like habit formation. And obviously one of the things you want to focus on is building a habit on focus, right? So I'd be looking to literature that kind of offers that. The book that springs to mind is Atomic Habits. It's really good. But kind of I would probably, and it sounds like you prefer nonfiction. So I would probably sort of draw in books from that perspective. I'd also like you to, and I do this with all my clients, is do some journaling.
Yeah.
Because, it's such a big part of like self-therapy and self-healing as well as taking it to a therapist if you wanted. Which is sort of trying to understand the issues that you're facing, trying to explore them, what you might have picked out from literature, how the literature is making you feel as well, because all these things do trigger emotions in us, and often we'll probably choose to ignore them or not acknowledge them, but I think it's really important to honor those feelings as you're sitting with the books or the story, because it's telling you something, and just noticing what's going on in your body, etc. So I'd want you to write down that, and we'd see like over the days how that's changing, and just do like a summary at the end.
Fab. I'm really quite fascinated by this. Okay, let me take us into the area that I am probably most excited to talk to you about, because one of the things that's become very clear to me over the last 30 years is that facts are important, very important, but it's the stories that tend to sell things. It's not the facts. You can, and I've got a professor coming on next week from the States who specializes in this area. So we're going to have another conversation about this in a couple of weeks. But where would you sit the sort of the self storytelling? That I call it being an archaeologist of your own life. I mine my life constantly. I create stories nearly every day from my life, and people like that. They say, because they've never heard it before, it's a new story, it's a true story oftentimes, and I'm often told by people that they find it very difficult to come up with their own stories. Now I know you've written extensively, and you've written poetry, you've written books, you're very experienced in a journalist, way more experienced than me. So how would you suggest, or what do you think about that? People writing their own stories, but how should they go about it?
Sure. So, I mean, have you heard of narrative storytelling?
I know narrative poetry. I'm not sure about narrative storytelling.
Yeah, so narrative storytelling, I guess, is, and we use this with children a lot, which is kind of, if they're worried about something, is to kind of make themselves the main character of their own story and write their story as though they've resolved the problem that they're facing.
Right.
So it's very much they're processing what's going on for them, but also kind of problem solving, and that's really sort of a therapeutic tool that people use literally called narrative storytelling, which is really writing stories with you as the main character or you as the protagonist. So we tend to use that a lot with children. I think children's imaginations are fantastic. So it's very easy for them to kind of, come up with things or say things. But I think obviously as an adult, writing your own stories can sometimes feel quite daunting. We all have writer's blocks, But my first tip would always be like, just write as though nobody is like reading. Because that judgment is such a defense. It's going to stop you from writing.
Yes.
And secondly, I always say actually the best time to write is when you're feeling a really strong emotion, and that could be if you're feeling really angry or really anxious or really irritated. Like that is the time to write.
All right. Okay.
And I do that especially with poetry or confessional poetry. Like the best poetry is written like when you're in the midst of like emotion. So those would be like my two big tips. And then also, kind of just whenever you see things in your day that resonates with you, write it down in a book. Just carry a little notebook and just write things down that really resonate with you, because they're telling you something, and you might make some meaning from it. And
yes,
in your writing, and it might inspire you or inspire a story or something. And that's also those are the kinds of things that are also going to move others if they were to read your work.
Yes.
It's going to be fascinating.
Very good. Right. Okay. I mean, it's nice to hear somebody who knows what they're talking about this stuff, because I've suspected a lot of these things for a long time, and wondered if I was up the right tree, if you know what I mean. But so again, if I was a lot of my clients are business people. They're usually working for large, complex organizations, and many times they are under pressure because of that, because they've got shareholders, or they've got founders, or they've got whatever to report to, and they've got 50,000 people working for them, and they're wondering how on earth they're going to engage them. How can storytelling help in that context, both in terms of reading other people's stories, but also creating your own? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you're like a high-level executive who's got very little time to kind of go and write their own story, or what I would say is really just we'd get them like a reading list that's tailored to sort of the little limited time that they have, but also B, to kind of 3 or 4 books that are really going to influence them and really going to kind of I guess impact them to make whatever changes that they're seeking to make. And that could be probably like an audiobook or something, a non-fiction audiobook if they like non-fiction. As I know many execs do enjoy reading like a lot of non-fiction as well. Just to kind of make sure that they have time to listen. They can listen to this like on the go, and forcing them to do a little bit of journaling after having read something, because that's really, really important as a reflective tool of what it's bringing up for them. And just drawing whatever lessons they can. So this is all, I guess, more of a self-therapy perspective, because I know how busy executives are as well, and they might not always have time for therapy, but kind of, these are the small things that they can do in their day-to-day. I would also suggest perhaps, I don't know, teaming up with someone else, like a book club, and kind of, just reflecting back what they've learned with somebody else, who can kind of offer new insights based on what they've read. I often think that when we read a book, we only see one perspective, and then there's somebody else who's read the same book, and they offer like a lot of different insights. And it's nice to be able to get all of that versus just your reading or something.
Yes.
So,
I've seen the proliferation of book clubs, and I'm slightly cynical, not of the sort of the public ones, reading fiction. I've seen it in the business media. There's a lot of people. I don't believe people are reading the books. And there is some evidence. I mean, I remember reading. It was an American study. Obviously, it's just one study, but it was they claimed that only 17% of business books sold were ever read, and of that 17%, less than 10% of the people who did it read more than the introduction.
Yeah, it's incredible how many books I don't read them.
Unbelievable. I mean, I'm guilty. I mean, I am literally surrounded by the things. You know, I adore them. I try to get through them. But
and you read them.
I've got a slip. I mean, is it better to read them, or is it better to listen to them, or does it not matter?
I think you have to do what you immediately can connect with. So if you connect with the voice more and being read to, then I would say that. If you prefer reading and you're more visual, then I would say like paperback or Kindle. I do all mediums, but like my biggest one is Kindle and audio, just because I like to have my paper on the go.
Okay. And do you think that the summary services, like, you know, it used to be, I'm showing my age here, but back when my grandfather was alive, there was a Reader's Digest. They used to send these, you know, 4 books in one. I've still got some of them around the house.
Yeah, I love Reader's Digest.
I use one called Blinkist. I use for business books, because most business books are not great, you know. So I like to, you know, I filter them by looking at the sort of the key outcomes, and then I go in and I read the book of the one that I think the outcomes are interesting. There's not always a correlation, but what do you think of that? What do you think of the sort of book summary?
I like Blinkist, and I think it is great for nonfiction. But I have read like some of the summaries, and sometimes I feel like some of it's just things are missed, right? Because you have inevitably, you know, there's only so much you can include. So I don't always like, I guess if I like a book and I like the summary, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go get the book now because I want to know more. So it's great from that perspective. Obviously, it's great if you're short of time. And many people do like that, so there's probably a market for that. But like you, who likes to really get into a book or into a subject, I think there will always be people who will need more than just the summary, you know.
So if I'm really going to be nosy now. Hold on, I'll get us back on. What's your favorite book?
What's my favorite book? Oh God, you know, it's so funny. Like my favorite book. I mean, I've read so many books, but so it's very hard to pinpoint a book that's the favorite. But The Celestine Prophecy, which is one that I love. So I can do it like different ages in my life. So like Celestine Prophecy was when I was growing up. It's like a fiction book. But it's also just it's like this. Just give me a second. I'm just gonna my charger in. It's based in it's about the Aztecs, and they have like this manuscript that talks about basically just all these 10 secrets that gives you like the meaning of life and the life philosophy. Can you hear me?
Yes. Oh, I can hear you. Can't see you now. I think we're having a little bit of a problem. Okay. Well, hopefully. Oh, that's a shame. Hopefully Bijal will get that back. I'll just put her off for a minute or two. You know, some weeks the technology is hilarious, isn't it? So while Bijal's hopefully going to come back to us, I think, oh, I can hear a beep. Hopefully you're back. I don't see your picture yet, Bijal. I'll just keep talking. I'm going to show a video to see if we can give you some time to sort that tech out. I have quite an intimate relationship with books, and I'm not in any way saying that I have the depth of knowledge that Bijal has, but I do see them as very special, and I think it was because of my grandfather, and I think he had no money, so he did tend to subscribe to Reader's Digest and things like that. So I do have a lot of these books around the house. But about 2 years ago, I I wrote a piece of poetry about my relationship with books. And one of the things you learn when you're doing live broadcasting is always have a plan B. So I'm going to show you this. It's a very short piece of poetry, but nonetheless, I wrote it. And it kind of summarizes a lot of the wonder that I get from books. Even the simplest book, even the Mills and Boon rubbish, I see it as rubbish, but other people get things from it. And I think Bijal was really emphasizing that there's something there that you can take from a book. So this is how I tried to summarize my relationship with books.
With books. Marinating in a room of books, the hardbacks with their strong glossy armour, the softbacks opening for you to read their pages with a wild heart. No Zen illusion, rather an invitation to a conversation. Hearing thoughts and feeling emotions, each a friend's tale and a lesson, some short and clear, others long and tedious. Dust jackets saying everything, or the twisting final paragraph. Daunting effort and exhilarating potential. Which story would you rather live? Go deeper and themes appear, from Beowulf to Shades, the predicaments of human beings, revealing our inner desire for story. A vicarious experience, a mirror, wiring reality. But which reality? Regardless of truth, something dark tells us how the story ends. Inner lies creating gentle meaning, sculpting our conspiracies. Will the writer's vision be the end of us?
So I wrote that in this room, and before it was the studio that's normally here behind me, it was all books. And I get something quite, I'm not, as you know, I'm not into spirituality, and I'm not into a lot of the sort of the more esoteric things that people are into, but there is something that I find very calming about books, their general, the relationship with them, and just their presence. And I think it's why I'm so drawn to libraries. And I still escape, once I get over this COVID, I still go to Oxford as often as I can to read in the Bodleian, or to visit the new, I think is it the Western Library? Beautiful place. Very, very beautiful. Now, Bijal's back. Let's see if we can get this to work. Let's have a go. Come on, let's have a go. Hi there.
I'm terribly sorry, everyone.
That's all right.
Really
Don't be daft. It's not, one of the things you really learn about, this sort of world we live in, all the organisations talk about how it's great to do visual and virtual and all the rest of it. The technology's still catching up.
It really is, and it's just yeah.
So I was in the middle of asking you what your favourite book was, and you like the Celestine Prophecy.
Yes, the Celestine Prophecy. It's just an incredible book about our connection with nature, and I think like right now with climate change and everything, it's a fascinating book. I mean, it talks about how plants and nature really understand humans, and that the relationship between them, and the fact that it's such a symbiotic relationship. And I know it's quite, in a way, it's similar to the Overstory. I don't know if you've come across that. It was like, and he's written a new book called, I think Richard Powers or something. Yeah, and he's written a new book called Bewilderment, which I'm about to read. And I know it won the Man. Did it win the Man Booker or something? Yeah, it's just amazing. Like it was shortlisted. Sorry, and it's the Celestine Prophecy was obviously written a very long time ago. It's based on the Aztecs and their life philosophies. But it's such an interesting way of looking at life, and like how almost reminds me a little bit of Eastern philosophy, in the sense that it's more communal, and it's less sort of individual. We in the West, we live in a very sort of individualized society. We're thinking about ourselves and the ego, and it's just a beautiful book on like group healing, the being part of a group with nature, like humans and trees. And it was one of my favorite books growing up, and I think whilst it was based on this Aztec myth, it's a brilliant work of fiction, but with some truth in it. So I think, you know, you should really, I would really recommend that. And then as I've grown up, you know, I as a teenager, I love like A Thousand Splendid Suns, Khaled Hosseini, who's actually sort of he's Afghanistani, and Americans obviously with everything going on in Afghanistan at the moment, it's quite sad. But there's a lot of echoes of the Taliban rule in that book. But it's a brilliant book. Just his writing and his ability to get into the, you know, people's.
I haven't heard of that one. What was it? Remind me of the name. I haven't heard of that one. What was the name again?
A Thousand Splendid Suns. He also wrote The Kite Runner.
Oh,
so
no, that one, of course you do.
Yeah. So this is the other one of his other books. Just
right, okay.
Brilliant read.
Right, okay.
And then as time has gone on, I've become more interested in like therapeutic books, obviously, but like there's some great autofiction that came out just a while ago. Laurie Gottlieb's Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. It's about a therapist talking about her own therapy, but also the therapy of her clients. And she's written it in like a novel format, so it's super interesting.
Right.
And you know, I recently also read a nonfiction book called Black Wave, which was brilliant. Oh, there you go, you've got it up.
Black Wave.
Black Wave by Kim Gattas. And it's actually a political book, but it's super interesting about like why the Middle East is in the situation that it's currently in. Obviously, sort of, you know, it all sort of you need to also read A Peace to End All Peace before you read Black Wave to give you the full history. But you know, pre-colonization, post-colonization, the Iranian Revolution, the Saudi, you know, anyway, I think I'm getting too technical, but it's just a brilliant, the way she's written it, this journalist, Kim Gattas, I think she's a journalist for CNN, like brilliant storytelling, again, very fast paced, like it's a very nice, but with everything that's going on at the moment, the good war, the bad war, like I think there's, you know, as the US label it, but the bad war with Iraq, the good war with Afghanistan, it's a brilliant book, non-fiction if you're into non-fiction. And then other fiction books are like Gentleman of Moscow. I love that. Sort of. It was a great lockdown book. But I can keep throwing recommendations to you guys, so I think I should stop.
No. I think it's a privilege personally when someone recommends a book to me and they're being honest, and I'll tell you why I say that in a minute, because there is a reason why I say they're being honest. I actually think it's a privilege, because if they have invested, I think we'll have to do this a different way. I'm going to have to put you off, but you're still here. Yeah, there's too much echo coming through. I think what I mean here, Bijal, is that I if someone says, look, I love this book, I have a real tendency of going and buying it, because if I know that person, or more important, I want to know that person, I think reading their favorite book can be quite a useful tool. And I used to use it, and I was slightly Machiavellian. I don't know what you think. You probably don't like this, but I used to do corporate internal coaching events for companies. I don't do it anymore, but I used to do it, and I used to ask them all what was their favorite book before the event. And I'd pretty much read most of the books that they would say, you know, Lord of the Rings, Shogun, the usual, you know. But there was always a few of them I absolutely knew had never read that book. And it used to make me giggle. I mean, I didn't blame them or anything, but I would rather someone said, "Oh, my favourite book is the Beano," than pretend they read War and Peace. You know, I don't know if you've come across that. It's like book lying.
Yeah. I mean, probably. I mean, I think people probably feel such a pressure to have to come across as cultured, or you know, or people read well, and so and it's
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
But it's a great way to know about someone. I think it's a wonderful way to really learn about somebody, like just through the books that they read. Like you instantly kind of get a sense of what kind of a person someone is, their
Yeah,
personality. So
I think
that's a
that's
great
right.
trick.
And no doubt some pseudo psychologists will have some way of putting people in boxes depending on the books that they read. I'm sure there's a model, red
Yeah,
book readers are this and yellow book readers are that. There always is somebody doing that.
absolutely.
Yeah. And the final thing that I would really like, I mean, regular followers of this show know, Bijal, that I'm a massive poetry fan. And I'm not massively well read in terms of poetry. I mean, I have my probably 20 different poets that I really love. And I was never schooled in poetry particularly. I mean, I was weirdly, when I was at university, my very first university building was in Craig Lockhart in London, in Edinburgh, which is where Sassoon and Wilfred Owen wrote their great poems.
Oh, really?
In
Okay.
that building, yeah, it was the hospital where Dolce Decorum Est was written and others were written in that actual building.
Oh, wow.
But what do you think about what is it about poetry? What does poetry bring that is maybe different to narrative storytelling or non-fiction?
I think poetry, because it's so succinct and sharp, I think it instantly takes you into an emotional space faster than, I guess, any sort of fictional narrative does.
Right, okay.
And it's also it invites a lot of questions. I think that's what poetry does. I don't think it ever really answers a question, but I think it asks you a lot of questions because it really prompts a lot of thinking. And that's the reason why it's such a great therapeutic tool. Because it does really get you exploring your feelings. And it can be quite triggering as well, more so than fiction, I think, because it's giving you that sort of open access to maybe the writer or the poet's feelings.
Yes.
And then obviously through that you're seeing yourself, because it's triggering you.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's probably more intimate in some ways than, writing or narrative fiction. Yeah.
And why is it so many of us? I mean, we probably write more than any other time in human history, I would suggest right now, because the outcome, the amount of writing that kids do is unbelievable. The social media, and I guess it's not linked to quality always, but nevertheless, they're writing all the time. Why is it that we continue, despite all the tech, it's still the little stories that really matter?
Yeah, I think it's because as humans, we're always searching for meaning,
Yes.
and we're searching for ourselves, and we're searching for a sense of self as well. And I think stories offer all of that. And that's one of the things that stories do. They give us like this space to really kind of explore ourselves and to connect with others, which sometimes, in reality can be quite difficult.
Yeah.
People aren't always honest with each other. Writing is always honest in some ways, fiction is always like, it's, even if it's fiction, it's still a writer's kind of honest story or something. So I think this is what stories do. They are, I almost feel like, make us feel connected to the world,
That's a pretty good point to say thank you to you, because I think that's right, and it's been sorry, it's been lovely speaking to you. I'm sorry we've had some tech issues.
I'm so sorry as well.
It happens. Can I just say thank you very much for coming on? It's been lovely having you on, and I think maybe given the tech issues, we might have to have you back again sometime, because there's an awful lot of questions in my head I didn't get to. So I'd like to ask you a lot more questions, and I'm fascinated by your the idea that you have. I'm fascinated by the reading list that you've got on your website. I love the idea of it being linked to therapy. I'm not so keen on Freud, I have to say.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Real pleasure. So
No, it's
thank
been such
you.
a pleasure, Scott. Thank you. I did bring in artifacts.
Oh,
My
thank
AirPods.
you. Let's have it. Sorry. There we go.
Yeah, I brought my AirPods because they're the things that connect me to everyone, like people's voices. And when I hear people's voices, I feel safe.
Yes.
Just love that. And I also, because I read a lot of audiobooks, so
Yes,
it's my favorite thing to do.
Thanks for remembering that. Sorry, I forgot because all the tech, it's my fault. So thank you
No,
very much.
no.
So, it's been a real pleasure, and I really do hope we can have you on the show again. That was great. Thanks very much.
Scott, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Speak to you later.
Speak to you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. That was lovely. I'm sorry there was a few wee tech issues, but nevertheless, there was a nice theme there of the importance of why we should be thinking about stories in a broader sense, and actually they can do stuff that's really good for us in here. So I've never come across someone that does that for a living before, as you could probably tell, and I do have millions of questions. So I think we'll have to see if I can persuade her to come back on again. But I hope you enjoyed it. So that was show 49. This is Artifact Live, and we look at the art and science of storytelling. And next week is my big 5-0, and I was wondering what to do about that and how to bring 50. I can't believe I've done 50 shows. 50 shows, coming together. How am I going to celebrate it? I thought, well, initially I was going to do some editing, and I was going to do one of those, like, do you remember like all the old American TV shows? They used to have like Dallas, where there'd be an episode where it'd be a flashback episode. Well, no, I'm not going to do that, because one, editing something like, oh God, how many hours is it now? 120 hours of Artifact. I'm not sure if I can control all of that at once. So I'm not going to do that. But what I am going to do, I've got one of my buddies coming back on again, because him and I, and it's this guy here, Tom Stanhope, him and I started sort of looking at changing our careers, if you like, or changing the focus of our careers when lockdown happened. Tom, who's been on the show a couple of times, used to make films. He still makes films, and he's good at it. But he realised that his business was not going to survive lockdown. So what he did was he just turned the camera around and started to talk about broadcasting. And I think he's done a terrific job. But I want to talk to him about that. And there's a story in that in itself, because it's a proper transformation story, in my opinion. So it's well worth. Let's just have a reconnect with Tom. But also, I wanted somebody that I'm comfortable with, in terms of just having a chat about how I feel the first 50 have gone. Have we used the time well? Have we created the body of work that I was hoping to create? Have we helped the audience? Have we helped you with your journey as a storyteller? And if we have, great. How have we done that? And if we haven't, how could we change it? How could we make it better? How could we, build on this incredible? It's incredible the number of people I've had on the show now. Wonderful people. So I'm really looking forward to that. So I hope you can join me next week. So it'll just be called Storytelling next week, show 50. And it's something that, if you'd asked me 12 months ago that I would end up having done 50 shows, I would have said you were an idiot. So it's something I'm really quite proud of. It is moving to 12:30, as I said at the start of the show. The reason for that is a few people have said, well, we're back in the office now. Would you mind moving it to lunchtime so we can still tune in? So I'm responding to my audience, and I'm going to move the show to 12:30. I hope that's okay for everybody. I'm still going to do the replay at 12 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, because I think that still fits with some people's diaries. So I'm going to continue to do that. And that leaves me really with just to say thank you. Thank you very, very much for my guest, Bijal Shah. I thought she was absolutely magic and did really well with the technology she was having to put up with. So thank you very, very much, Bijal. It was terrific to have you on the show. My name is Scott MacArthur, and you've been watching Artifact Live, and I can't wait to come back with the 50th show next week.